What is the deal with Hisoka and Machi? Hisoka having some sort of itch for Machi has been pretty obvious from the get-go, and aside from blatant flirtation, we can tell this through the art of card suits. Something that doesn't come across in the Hunter x Hunter anime that does in the manga is Hisoka's dialogue often being marked with a card suit at the end, either a diamond, a club, a heart, or a spade. And each of these suits actually form part of Hisoka's own personal grammar, although very few of the suits have a straightforward meaning. Although whenever Hisoka gets serious, it tends to be marked by a spade. In Heaven's Arena, when he said it was time to hunt down the spiders, that was marked with a spade. And when he held Killua back, saying if Killua moved, he'd die, Hisoka not only said this with a spade, but he also held a spade card to Killua's neck. And that is the point at which Killua knew that Hisoka was not bluffing. If Killua moved, then Hisoka was gonna slice his throat straight open. But of all of the suits, Hearts is definitely the most straightforward. Hisoka uses a heart whenever he really likes something or links to someone, but it's not full-on swing battle excitement. And whenever Hisoka speaks to Machi, only hearts are used. With other characters who have warranted a heart, including Jing, Hisoka rocked up to the chairman election wanting to meet Jing, but he also reacted to Ginta with a heart after judging him as a super serious 9.0. And of course, often when speaking about or to Gon, Hisoka ends up with a heart here and there. But Machi is the only one who gets constantly bombarded with these grammatical hearts. And whenever Hisoka speaks to Machi, it's probably the most normal interaction that Hisoka has with any character. He even asked her to dinner, whereas Hisoka's traditional date suggestion would usually be some kind of isolated battleground. Hisoka's attraction to Machi used to be something of a mystery, because she's the only person who he's ever been shown to feel, how shall we say, traditional attraction towards. But we've recently cleared up exactly why it is that Hisoka pines over Machi, and it's because of Hisoka's own definition of love. Really, I've got pretty normal tastes. When I heard about exterminating the ants, it didn't turn me on because they were ants. The tremendous rumbling feeling I felt a number of times here, finding out it was a group ability made possible through the support of a Nen beast with the power of a ceremony, it really turned me off. See, I'm normal. I'm not interested in bestiality or an orgy. I can't get aroused. I'm just a guy who wants to be with someone one-on-one so we can love each other to death. Essentially, Hisoka's just a chill guy who wants to settle down with a monogamous fight battle relationship. And we as fans have a tendency to point towards Chrollo as Hisoka's ultimate desire here. But I would argue that Machi fits Hisoka's criteria just as much, if not much more better. And what Hisoka is actually doing is using Chrollo to seduce Machi in his own twisted battle clown way. And by the way, this animation of Hisoka is something that I did go out of my way to pay someone to make, a rather questionable financial decision that I was allowed to embark on thanks to the sponsor of today's video, Rocket Money. Rocket Money is an easy to use app that helps you save more and manage your money better. Manage and management are very magical words, because as soon as I started using them, it was like money just appeared out of nowhere. But in reality, what that was me saving a lot of money that I didn't even realize I was spending. Because one of the features I love most about Rocket Money is their ability to identify and cancel subscriptions that I've forgotten about with just a few taps. And to date, Rocket Money has helped customers save over $500 million dues in canceled subscriptions, as opposed to me having to troll through bank statements and trying to identify what charges what through the vague letters and numbers they give you in the billing info. They make it as difficult as possible. But Rocket Money makes that difficult easy. And Rocket Money can also help you create a customized budget in minutes. It is incredibly simple and intuitive, but this right here is the wild part. Rocket Money can also automate your savings. What does that mean, man, on the internet? Well, it means good. As after you choose a savings goal, the app automatically analyzes your accounts to determine the optimal time to save so that you can reach your goals faster. I've personally been using Rocket Money for about half a year now, and I used part of my savings for last month to surprise my wife with some cupcakes, because that is the sort of power you wield when you take control of your own personal finances. So to take control of your finances today, go to rocketmoney.com/NewWorldReview to get started for free. And on a personal note, thank you so much to Rocket Money, because it's sponsors like them that allow us to bring you the best fictional hunter content possible as often as possible. So definitely check them out. But for now, it's back to you. Me. And a large part of this has to do with her Nen ability. Machi can transmute her aura into Nen stitches to perform a wide variety of tasks, including puppeteering, as well as healing or even just straight up killing, all of which fascinates Hisoka, and he's even dropped a little hint before during Heaven's Arena that he may be hurting himself on purpose just to see Machi's abilities in action. Hisoka is impressed and almost transfixed by the Nen stitches. And I think that the first time you read or watch this, it sounds like an excuse to see Machi. Hisoka wounds himself just to have her presence. But the longer that Hunter x Hunter goes on, I really do think it's the ability itself that arouses Hisoka significantly more. Machi is an incredibly appealing partner to him because her ability means that they can rip each other apart for all eternity. They can love one another to death over and over and over, and then a fourth time, or however many they want. It's not just a one-night stand like every other opponent who either dies or I guess kills Hisoka. With Machi, there is a true potential to spend an entire lifetime living in Hisoka's definition of bliss. And it's not just because Machi can heal him and herself. Plenty of Nen abilities have those kind of properties. But with Machi, the attraction is that the strings can be used to put Hisoka back together, yes, but only after they've been used to rip him apart. Machi is the full package. And on one occasion, Hisoka does actually claim to love Machi. After reviving himself from death, Hisoka restrains Machi with bungee gum and he states, "Taking my love for granted, get it off yourself and stop me." Although here I think that Hisoka choosing to use the word love is also a pun because it can refer to bungee gum itself, which carries the secondary name elastic love. So with that reading, you could argue that Hisoka was saying that Machi was taking his ability for granted. But given everything that we've spoken about so far, as well as the crazy stuff yet to come, I think that Hisoka intended both meanings. And Machi's face when Hisoka says this is one of sheer fury. If this woman gets free, she is going to kill Hisoka in the most messed up, ultra-violent way she can. And that is pretty damn hot. This is exactly the feeling that Hisoka wants. He doesn't want Machi to return his affections in the standard way with these soft, loving looks and cuddles and kisses and crap. No, none of that. Hisoka wants Machi to want nothing more than to tear him to pieces. This right here is the face of love. A face which Chrollo has yet to give him. And with that, I would pose the idea that Chrollo is simply a stepping stone in getting to Machi. On Greed Island, Hisoka asks Machi, "And if I kill Chrollo, then what?" To which Machi replies, "That would be impossible, but I'll answer your question. I would pursue you to the ends of the earth, and I will kill you." To which Hisoka simply says, "I like the sound of that," with the most warm expression I've ever seen him make. As a fan base, again, we often focus on Hisoka's obsession with Chrollo as the ultimate toy, but we forget about the rest of the toy box. And within that toy box contains the primary and ultimate target of Hisoka's definition of romance. And so there is an argument to be made that Hisoka pursuing Chrollo is just a path to having Machi pursue him. Hisoka wants to kill Chrollo so much that Machi turns her full attention to him, and what Machi sees as issuing a threat, the idea of pursuing Hisoka to the ends of the earth and killing him, Hisoka sees as a happily ever after. What Machi said there may as well have been proposing to him, because it's a very traditional, considering the circumstances, it's a very traditional idea of having a partner devoting themselves entirely to you. And in the meantime, pursuing Chrollo, it's a fun little fling, but that is not the true romantic endgame here. And because of this Greed Island conversation, Machi may very well be aware of this, and interestingly, from Hisoka's perspective, what's happened here is the formation of a bit of a love triangle. There's a moment in chapter 371 where Machi and Chrollo reunite after the murder of Shalnok and Kortopi, and they stare each other down, both claiming that they're the ones who are going to kill Hisoka, with no mechanisms of settling their differences because a coin flip doesn't work when everyone else in the troop also wants to kill Hisoka. But put them aside for now, the focus here is on these two, and it's framed almost like romantic competition. These two rivals who both want the same man are staring each other down and declaring that they will be the ones to win his heart by ripping it out of his chest and squishing it. And in the world of Hisoka's romance, that is exactly what's happening. He's looking for the one, his sole destined partner who he can devote himself to and who can devote themselves to him. And after being ignored throughout the entire series by both Machi and Chrollo, it must be euphoric for Hisoka to now have both of these potential suitors fixated on winning his heart. And so Machi has her eye on Chrollo, quite literally. In chapter 377, when the Phantom Troop split up on the Black Whale One to hunt Hisoka, Machi apparently went off on her own. However, if we look closely at the group shot of the troop setting out, Machi's eyes are locked onto Chrollo. Every other troop member is looking forward in their various directions, ready to scour the ship for a battle clown, but Machi Machi's focus is on Chrollo, and this has led to the theory that Machi is actually quietly trailing Chrollo because she knows what Hisoka's intentions are and where he is most likely to show up. And as much as I love this theory, it is a little bit contradicted by the very last time we see Machi, which is actually in chapter 380. There's a brief recap of where everyone is aboard the Black Whale 1, and apparently Machi is just chilling in a cabin on tier 5, whilst Chrollo, Benolanov, and Shizuku are on tier 4, and we now know that Chrollo eventually makes it to at least tier 3. Things could have changed between now and then, and also Machi may have been trailing him with like a super long Nen string or something, but either way, the Hisoka, Chrollo, Machi love triangle is very real. And while Hisoka's feelings are obvious, it's much harder to decipher what Machi's feelings are / were for him, because she happens to be somehow a much greater enigma of Hunter x Hunter than Hisoka ever was. And the craziest thing about Machi is that Hisoka is her strongest character connection in all of Hunter x Hunter, by which I mean the connection that Togashi chooses to focus on the most. Like, you can count the amount of direct interactions that Hisoka and Machi have had in the series on one hand, but whenever Hisoka's not there, Machi is still being asked about Hisoka. Like Franklin in chapter 71, or is thinking about Hisoka, as she has been non-stop since he fought Chrollo in Heaven's Arena. And aside from the Phantom Troop flashback where Sarasa is Machi's main concern, Hisoka is at all times a looming specter over Machi, which doesn't mean that she feels for him. And in fact, I think this may be Togashi portraying what it's like to have someone rather dangerously fixated on you. Despite the first interaction that we saw of them in Heaven's Arena, it was later revealed that Machi was ordered to go there to inform Hisoka of an upcoming troop gathering. So it's not like she was there of her own accord, although further history is implied. But the other point of potential Machi feels comes from her second trip to Heaven's Arena, where after being killed by Chrollo, Machi chooses to stay behind with Hisoka's body, claiming that he paid her in advance for Nen services, and she'd see them through to clean up his body at the very least. And whilst walking away, Shalnok muses about what a nice person Machi is. So when you're reading this, I think it does appear that Machi has some sort of special feelings for Hisoka, no matter how mild to wild they may be, because this is a very Zoldyck mentality. You complete the job that you've been paid for, but even the Zoldycks cancel contracts if their client dies. Machi has no responsibility here, so it must be simply out of feels for Hisoka, right? Well, no, not right, because what Machi did here was eventually down the line made very clear. In the Phantom Troop flashback, their childhood friend Sarasa was brutally kill-murdered and had unspeakable things done to her body, and it was only thanks to a Nen user by the name of Renko that Sarasa's body was restored to a state of peace afterwards. And this is what prompted Machi to learn Nen. She asked if Renko could teach her, and Machi eventually developed her own similar Nen ability. So when Machi chooses to stay and fix Hisoka's mangled body, to me this definitely reads more as the specter of Sarasa. Even more so than the healing of the living, fixing the bodies of the dead is what Machi was inspired to learn Nen to perform. And Hisoka was at one point a Phantom Troop member, even if he was faking. So I do think that Machi just wanted to honor the reason why she learned Nen to begin with. Now, all of this is assuming that we read the manga only, as when viewing the 2011 anime, I think you could definitely be forgiven for thinking that Machi was very interested in Hisoka. And that's because they made a pretty big change to their dynamic. In the manga, after fixing Hisoka's injuries, Machi leaves and we don't see her again until August 31st with the other troop members, after which point the manga narrator has a brief speech about our Hisoka. Hisoka never speaks of his past. He's not particularly interested in events long gone. He'll probably forget what Castro looks like by tomorrow. Hisoka is his own man, and he's confident that he is the most powerful, which is a very nice little insight into the mind of Hisoka. But in the 2011 anime, after Machi leaves Heaven's Arena, she stops and looks back at the tower, longingly thinking about Hisoka, and then she speaks the narrator's monologue, which comes with some pretty heavy implications. The first is that she knows Hisoka probably better than anyone else on this planet, because she is divulging details about a character that only the narrator of the story would know. She seems to have this deep understanding of his personality, his likes, and his habits. And the second is that Machi even cares enough to begin with to look back at Heaven's Arena and think about Hisoka, which she does not in the manga. And the third is that Machi's new words are now juxtaposed directly against Hisoka in the shower, implying some hot physical attraction. None of this is accurate to manga Machi. Despite their implied history, she doesn't know Hisoka particularly well, and there's no evidence to suggest that she even particularly cares about him. Honestly, the best evidence I could give you is how unusually talkative Machi was the first time we saw her with Hisoka, asking all kinds of questions of him and making making commentary about his personality that later Machi would never do to anyone. Even to the Phantom Troop members, Machi is usually very curt to the point, and she doesn't tend to offer words. Words can be extracted from her whenever someone else asks her a question, but otherwise her early dialogue with Hisoka, that is very unusual. But that's one of those things that can be explained away by Togashi's more improvised writing style in the early, middle, and even later days of Hunter x Hunter. I would say that he created Machi and wasn't quite sure what kind of character she was going to be at that stage, and so her dialogue is a little bit off in retrospect. And that would not be the first unintentional beat to do with Machi, as Togashi had originally planned for Hisoka to kill Machi after he revived himself. What I wanted to do most was have him, Hisoka, kill someone in the troop. I knew how the story was going to work out, but I hadn't decided who Hisoka would kill at the end. Hisoka wanted to kill Machi then and there, but I vetoed it. To lead into the voyage arc, I needed a messenger to deliver the news to the other troop members. He killed Kortopi and Shalnak as part of his post-mortem analysis of his performance in the fight, as well as for revenge, and I also wanted to show how serious Hisoka was through his cold and calculating judgment in reducing Chrollo's roster of abilities. Is my excuse after the fact. It was my hunch that letting Machi stick around would make it more interesting later on. So a lot of manga authors speak about their characters as if they're living, breathing beings, and it's always quite fascinating to see which of their characters take on a life of their own. Eiichiro Oda does this a lot with One Piece characters. He often says things like Luffy surprised him because he wanted to do this, and then he did that, and then whoa, all of a sudden I'm here. But in Togashi's case, Hisoka, the character, wanted to kill Machi. But Togashi, the author, felt that the story would be more interesting if she was allowed to live and host another conflict at a later date. And I would say that this was definitely the correct decision to make. But it's a good example of how I don't even think Togashi himself really knows how we got here, or ever even had plans to build a story around Hisoka and Machi. With this sort of context, my bet would be that it was less Togashi as an author who made the decision for Hisoka to initially flirt with Machi, but more the character himself, and Togashi still doesn't really know where or even if this is going anywhere. I know it sounds really wanky to say it like that, but that's just how a lot of manga authors think. And Togashi is a particularly character-driven author, so it wouldn't surprise me. So I don't think that Machi has or had any special feelings of that kind for Hisoka, maybe a slight curiosity at most, but unfortunately the feelings and abilities that she does have towards him happen to fit Hisoka's twisted definition of romance. And I think that's all that really matters with this connection. Machi's feelings are more or less irrelevant because this thread is all about Hisoka's fixation and how he is sculpting events to gain Machi's attention. He has spent so much of Hunter x Hunter yearning for Machi's attention, and now he's finally done something worthy of getting it. Hisoka's wish has come true. Machi is now entirely focused on him, and if Machi were to go and kill Hisoka, then I suppose that they would both be getting their desire.